It's a very short clip.
No,
the problem is the
We are the Houston County Archives and Museum. We're located in Erin in the basement of our courthouse. We archive Houston County's records back to 1871. We have a museum in the basement there where we're trying to collect and preserve our local history.
Okay. And you said you had some exhibit here.
Yes, we have loaned the Yellow Creek ledger, the Iron Furnace ledger, for this exhibit that's going to be traveling.
Right. Thank you. Appreciate you coming.
Sure, thank you.
Jerry's a descendant of his great grandfather, Thomas Driver, worked at the Cumberland Furnace Iron, and his grandfather's pictures in the Tennessee State Museum.
Is that right? What exactly was a furnace? We went through there.
It was an iron ore industry, Tennessee during that time.
You're not going
late
to see nothing really.
1800s.
You're not going to see anything.
No more than the post office probably down there.
Now that is, but he's saying what it was. Is that what you're saying?
No, they went looking.
Yeah, we were looking for it like last week.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like right now, the only thing down there is like the old depot.
Okay.
And at the depot.
Old depot or
And the
something.
post office, yeah.
So where was it? Was it off the main
It
road?
was off the
Off
main
the
road,
main
but it
road.
wasn't that far off the main road. No, about right there behind, about a quarter of a mile. Just kind of, it had to be off the road somehow.
But you know, back in the day, Tennessee was very rich in iron ore. So we had a lot of iron ore furnaces in the county. And the outlying iron ore furnaces only produced pig iron, which that was brought to the main one, which is Cumberland Furnace. You probably know that, right?
No, I don't.
Oh, well, it was brought to the main one in Cumberland Furnace, and that's where they made the actual products, like the pots and skillets and irons, things like that, that was used in products from the iron ore.
So was Cumberland Furnace like one of the biggest producers?
Yes, Cumberland Furnace was the biggest producer, and all the other ones, like I said, they just did the iron ore mold, where the pig iron, what they call the pig iron that went off in the mold, they just produced that.
Okay. Thank
Once you get to the sources, it makes a big difference, you know? And I'm telling you that the fun part is that, I mean, now you're making me sick, right?
Okay.
So that's how to start making some things.
Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna go there and get a.
It's hard to keep her away. I mean, if I could go anywhere in this county,
We're gonna move our train. All right, ready? Yeah.
tea and water to the right.
One, two,
We'll have a quick program here.
That's good. All right. Oh, I know. Y'all take the money. You young people, just take the money. They can't take it. Now they don't get it. You don't have to count it down. I know. You have to count it down. Becky Bell without. How you
My name is Zach Kinsel. I'm the executive director here at the Clement Railroad Hotel Museum, Hotel Halbert State Historic Site. The building we're in is 111 years old, built in 1913 to be a railroad hotel. With Dixon being the halfway point between the Tennessee River and the state capital, every train moving east to west would have to stop and refuel right here in this town, so perfect place for a hotel. In 1920, Future governor of Tennessee, our 41st governor, Frank G. Clement, was born here at this site. Being one of the most impactful governors in state history, we are just overjoyed to have a site recognizing his accomplishments from his birth in 1920 here till his untimely death at age 49 in 1969. Throughout the site today, you can see 11 different exhibits that highlight the history of our area of Middle Tennessee and the life and legacy of Governor Frank Clement. So we hope you can come check us out.
Thank you.
That works.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Very good. And just before we leave,
I grew up around here several times. Hello there. How are you? Good, good.
Well, I got a chance to meet a relative.
Okay, good, good.
I had to make a few comments on the video before
Oh, good.
I started.
Good.
To summarize what
Great.
the presentation is about.
Yeah.
So we got a good crowd here, don't we? Real good
You know what? I'm going to take some notes. But I think that. Is he mic? You have a mic on him?
Hello, Mr. Alfie. How you doing? I'm very excited to be here to hear your presentation and see what the see exhibiting and everything come down from Nashville. Could you just give us a quick summary of what this presentation is going to entail?
Yeah, so this presentation is called King Iron, and it is focused on the enslaved ancestors who were unfortunately enslaved at the iron furnaces. And so we walk through like a chronological time frame of what they were doing at the iron furnaces, the type of work, who were some of the enslavers, the grueling tasks that they were, of course, that they had to do. We talk about freedom seekers and how they also decided to take it upon themselves to self-emancipate themselves, which unfortunately came at a cost because a lot of deaths, unfortunately, did transpire out of that. And then the courageous, triumphant rebellion, if you will, to join the USCT colored troops and create autonomy for themselves and their family, as well as the community. And so that's what the exhibit is about. It's a very comprehensive overview. The presentation is a comprehensive overview about enslaved workers at the iron furnaces.
Thank you, thank you. Unfortunately, we won't be able to record the exhibit itself due to some state rules, but we are looking forward to the presentation. Thank you for your comments.
Yes, and definitely come down. It's going to be here at least until the end of July, I believe.
Okay.
So it's going to be here. So please come on down. You'll probably find a lot of connections between Nashville and Dixon and Clarksville because those three areas, as it relates to the USCT colored troops, you know, they were kind of one and the same. People all fighting for the exact same cause, which is freedom. So yeah, most definitely.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight to the Clement Railroad Hotel Museum, Hotel Halbrook State Historic Site in Dixon, Tennessee. We are very excited to have this new temporary exhibition on display here for the next little while, King Iron, the untold story of furnace workers in Tennessee. So first off, I'd like to thank, and of course I'm sure Frederick will do the same, thank Tennessee Humanities for the funding that made this possible. So thank you very much. And thank you to the Tennessee African American Historical Group for the creation of this exhibit and being so kind as to let us put it on display here. For those who don't know me, my name is Zach. I'm the executive director here at the site. The building we're currently in is, as of this year, 111 years old. Built in 1913 to be a hotel, closed in 1954. So it still doesn't stop people from trying to check in. Every once in a while, we have to turn somebody on. When they ask what's it cost to go through, we tell them $6, and they're blown away with how cheap the room is. It hasn't been that in a very long time. But we cover a lot of history here at the site. 1803 with the founding of the county to 1969 with the passing of Governor Frank Clement, who was born here in this building. I tell people we cover from Civil War to civil rights, from kind of that pre-Civil War era to the civil rights movement that flourished under Governor Clement's administration. But you'll get to see all of that tonight, but what you're here to see is, of course, the opening of our new exhibit, King Iron. I'd like to introduce a guy who's going to be speaking for a little bit here. One of the guys that created the exhibit you're going to see, Mr. Frederick Murphy. Right here, he wears a lot of hats. He wears a lot of hats. Currently, he serves as president of the Tennessee African American Historical Group. He's on the board of directors for the James K. Polk birth site out in North Carolina, on the board of directors for the Slave Dwelling Project, and a lot more. I don't know how he stays awake as much as he's got to travel, because I told him tonight he's going back to Charlotte, North Carolina when he's done here.
So I may probably go to Asheville.
That's still a good drive. We'll try to get you out of here before the sun completely goes. But please give a warm welcome and a round of applause for Frederick.
Are we able to get a couple more chairs? I think we just need 3 chairs. Is that?
Here's one here.
Sure, one chair?
Yeah, we're breaking.
Okay. Hey, y'all. This is not going to be anything formal. I'm just telling y'all, we're having a conversation. Okay. I would be remiss if I did not also include Tracy Jepson, who is my partner with the Tennessee African American Historical Research Group, and we were kind of switching shifts. So she did the first transport for the exhibit, and I'm responsible for this one, which also includes this presentation. Tennessee Humanities Representative. Boom! Yep, there we go. Shout out to them. Melissa and Aaron, Tennessee, provided some things for the exhibit as well. County Archives was huge, and of course here, Zach. We have, I'm not going to tell you what it is, you'll see it upstairs, but we have something here from Dixon County as well. And so this is King Iron, the untold story of enslaved furnace workers, not only here in this county, but we're talking Stewart County, we're talking Montgomery County, Houston County. You know all the counties where these iron furnaces were once functioning. Is this anyone's first time ever hearing about the iron furnaces? By show of hand, is anyone completely taken off guard by what even iron furnaces are? So just not too many people that have not heard of it. Okay, so that's good. So y'all feeling good tonight? Right. Spring is in the air. I think spring started a little bit early. You know, my allergies are already acting up. Already started acting up. So we're going to go ahead and get rolling. What we'll do is I'll be slapping my gums for about 25 minutes. And we do have some descendants of these individuals that were once enslaved at these iron furnaces. And so we'll just have a conversation. If anyone has any specific questions, and I encourage you to be thinking of some of those, because we'll just stay in our seats and just the descendants can speak if anyone has any questions. And then afterwards, we'll go upstairs and check out the exhibit. I would like to kind of tell you all some of our frame of thought as it relates to when we started it, so everyone can have like a comprehensive understanding on what it is that we were thinking, and you all can let us know if it makes sense or not at the end. Can everyone hear me right? Hear me good? Right, so good stuff. So I'm going to start. The rural areas of Middle Tennessee. Oh, let me let you all know. So I'm from Clarksville, Tennessee. However, all of my ancestors were here in this county, and they kind of dispersed to other areas. And through our research, you'll be able to know prior to them coming to this county where they were at as well, and a lot of the reasons in which why some of these ancestors ended up in this county was because of the iron furnaces. So I wanted to give you that background, okay? The rural areas of Middle Tennessee hold many stories, some well known, some forgotten, or perhaps not thought about. The history of the once great iron industry within the state is well known by many. A story that began in the late 18th century with the discovery of brown ore, iron ore deposits on the western Highland Rim. Consequently, scattered throughout the area are the old ore pits and quarries. Along the many creeks, one can find the abandoned railroad lines once considered essential to production. The iron itself was essential, bringing needed tools and supplies to a developing state on the edge of the wilderness frontier. Today, in some places, towering limestone iron furnaces are proudly preserved, accompanied by carefully placed place cards and protected behind the fences. But in most places, piles of rubble and slag are all that's left of an iron furnace. These broken remains peek out from the underneath decades of overgrown and their neglected foundations, which are the most indiscernible from the landscape. Historic locations left unattended and mostly unknown furnaces. What else about this history has been left unattended and unknown is what we have to think about. In the past, if one asked who worked at these iron furnaces and what the work entailed, there was often a response of silence, or even possibly a blank stare. It seemed it was something unknown to most and rarely discussed. And so today, we will be doing just that, okay? A little bit about us, the Tennessee African American Historical Group. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We started during the pandemic, which of course was a very unfortunate time due to just the world being turned upside down, of course. But what I felt like it did give people an opportunity to do is slow down and dive into more passion projects. And I even feel guilty sometimes saying that due to the circumstances. However, I feel like a lot more people were engaging in their family history, research, ancestry, DNA subscriptions went through the roof. Like, people had time, right? And so I don't know why we had this bright idea to come up with this during the middle of a pandemic, but we did, and we're very thankful for doing such. To this date, we have erected 4 historical markers and 1 partnership with another historical marker in Montgomery County, Tennessee. We have the USCT, 101st USCT Colored Troops headquarters, which is right in front of the Dunn Center, so that's a historical marker that's there. We have the Negro Fairgrounds, which is also a historical marker on the grounds of Austin Peay's campus. Pope G. Garrett was a longtime administrator of that, and so we have a historical marker of that there. We have the site where ancestors were enslaved and sold, which was on 2nd and Franklin in downtown Clarksville. And then also we partnered with David Britton and the folks down there at Dunbar Cave for Africana Town. And that was a place where individuals, freedom seekers who sought refuge at the start of the Civil War created camp and was provided safety there. So those are the things that we've done thus far. And this is kind of like our second big project. And so, again, you see the logo there for Emancipation, Tennessee. And then we've also had some people that are even in this room that have kind of helped supplement some of the funds for travel and things like that. And so you all know who you are. Thank you all for doing this. We greatly appreciate you. So the project overview, King Iron, the untold story of the enslaved furnace workers of Tennessee, delves into a previously little known aspect of Tennessee state history and the iron industry of the 19th century. The exhibit includes iron industry artifacts on loan from museums and archives throughout Middle Tennessee, interpretive panels expounding upon the lives and trials of workers, and a detailed diorama of the 19th century iron furnace scene. And so, yeah, we did big, y'all. Okay? We wanted we wanted to try to depict this as much as possible of what this looked like during that time frame. And so we feel like we did a really good job of doing that. And hopefully you all feel the same. So for me, as you all know, this is a Cumberland furnace. My great-grandfather, Clarence Lau, he worked at Cumberland Furnace, which was one of the last functioning furnaces post-Civil War. And so he worked there for a good number of years. And my great-grandmother left a memoir that discussed a lot of their time in all of these different, Louisa Furnace, Louisa Creek, like they lived all these places as sharecroppers. But this was one of the last places that he worked prior to just doing sharecropping full time. And so there was a freeze that happened here in the area. I can't remember exactly what year, but he had two sisters who died, and she kept referring back to Cumberland Furnace. Now, at the time, and it says 2021 here, that's when we began doing that, but she wrote this back in the early 90s. And so I didn't know what a furnace was at that time. I'm thinking from the institution of enslavement here in Middle Tennessee, tobacco. Like that's all I'm thinking. I'm not even thinking iron furnaces because where was that taught?
It wasn't taught.
Right.
Yeah.
And so every time I would come home, I would often come down here and go to the village. I would walk around, and then I linked up with another cousin who's here, Karen, and we saw a lot of other families that are connected to the Cumberland Furnace, such as the Tallies, such as the Daniels, and there's a Daniel store that was there. And I was able to meet the person who now owns that store. So it just provided a lot more context. So I said, well, if I didn't know much about this, how much does other people know, like more in depth, about how these iron furnaces help mold the economic fabric of this specific area, right? Because I think a lot of us do get caught up on the tobacco and cotton. However, there was a whole new monster, right, that was happening. So in 2021, we decided to begin the endeavor to find the stories of the workers that were enslaved at the iron furnaces. The initiative was fueled after finding my family connection pre-Civil War at the furnaces. And so that's when things really got interesting. So Karen, can you raise your hand, please? All right. So this was right before COVID. This was in 2019.
Yeah.
And we knew we were Jackson descendants from Alton Cabin Row, but we didn't know where we were prior to coming here to this area. And so, we had been looking, and it was right in front of our faces, on these death certificates. And so we looked at her third great-grandfather, my fourth great-grandfather, Ferdinand Jackson. And he had a son, was it Lucadra?
No, it was Anthony.
Okay, Anthony Jackson. And I just so happened to look at his death certificate, and it had his father's name and his mother's name, and under his father's name it said Florence, Alabama.
And I had that death certificate for years.
Yeah.
And didn't make that connection.
Yep, didn't make the connection at all. So Karen knows me. When I find out something, I'm on the horn. I'm making phone calls. So after that, I think it may have been like a week, and I was like, Karen, I got something on the hook, right? And so I was able to speak with the descendant of this lady right here, which is Sarah Moore Jackson. This is James Jackson, no relation to Andrew Jackson. However, at one point in time, they were buddies. And James Jackson also purchased enslaved individuals for Andrew Jackson when Andrew Jackson was off at war. Okay? The Force of Cyprus is in Florence, Alabama. Okay? So, I talked with the descendant and I said, hey, we're here in Montgomery County, Dixon County, Tennessee area. There's some connections. She automatically knew because she's the family historian as well. So I'm always the type where I gotta go there. I have to be in the space. And so I fostered a relationship with her, and then she connected us with some other people, and so we get all this information about the Forks of Cyprus. There was a Boy Scouts task that they had, and they were responsible for cleaning the African American formerly enslaved cemetery in Florence. Shared that with Karen. She's the cemetery lady here in this area, if you all didn't know. Matched up all these names, and it was just clockwork. Everyone matched. So I say all that to say that a lot of descendants of the Jacksons and Rainey's here are connected to the Forks of Cyprus in Alabama. Okay? So in 2021, Karen and I actually went down there. We put a presentation together, and we were both awarded these. We were awarded as being one of the founding families of Florence, Alabama. Because that was one of the earliest, because of the city's oldest families connections, and the Jacksons were part of that. And so we were very appreciative that they put that together to acknowledge the enslaved individuals who were also part of those founding families. So that was really huge for us, and that was on April the 9th, 2021, okay? So, now you can't stop there because you recognize that there is a tie with the Jacksons here at the furnaces. That furnace was Louisa Furnace. Okay? It was a company called Jackson and McKiernan, I believe. And so James Jackson's son was the Jackson who was up here for Jackson and McKiernan. Now, it's also important to know that James Jackson passed in 1840. So, who do you all think took over the Forks of Cyprus? Sarah. Absolutely. And she was very detailed and very good with her record keeping. They had enslaved individuals not only in Alabama, but also in Mississippi as well. Okay? So she ran the operation. And what she would do is that she would lease her enslaved workers, enslaved humans, to other places. And this is one of the places where she leased her enslaved humans, and that's where a lot of these Jacksons, they came from, right? So this is at the University of North Carolina, this book. We knew we needed some more evidence because we just like to have evidence, right? Who doesn't, right? And ancestry and family, search, they can only get you so far sometimes. And so I found out, I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I found out that UNC Chapel Hill had this book, and it's the Negro Furnace book of the Louisa Furnace. A guy from Nashville in the 1960s donated this book to the University of North Carolina, which was, of course, the first public university in the United States. So I'm a filmmaker as well. I'm a documentarian, and so I called up to the archives because I worked with the university before because I needed some archival stuff. And the person I called, she said her name, and she was like, "Fred?" Because I hadn't talked to her in a while. And I said, yeah. Shakespeare? Yeah, and so we got that whole thing going, right? So I know I'm good, right? I'm getting all kind of accents now, right? So she's like, yeah, come on up, boom, boom, boom. So I go up there, and there's the book. Original book. Not only the book of all the enslaved workers that they had there from, again, 1854 to 1860, but also the book of those individuals who had been enslaved as well. So this book takes into account everything that these people were doing. Everything they purchased, how many days they worked. It just was very, very detailed, right? And every name that you can think of around this area is in that book.
So when you laid eyes on that book, how did you feel?
Oh, it was, lay eyes. I went through it with my,
I know, but
it was,
it.
well, it didn't get really real until I saw family.
Okay, connections.
Right, well not yet, well yeah. So it felt good to have it because I've always been connected to Cumberland Furnace, right?
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, my great-grandfather worked, I knew he was at Cumberland Furnace. So I had no clue what I was going to find in Louisa Furnace. I was just going to make sure that I found surnames that were connected here, and for the people that were here, like if I saw a driver, I would say, hey, boom, this is what I found. I didn't expect to find what I found, and I don't think you were either.
No, and when I first opened the copy of the book, we saw not only our Jackson relatives, but I also saw my fourth great-grandfather, the Rainey, Nathan Rainey. That was on the first page.
Yep, very, very, very first
That
page.
gave me just chills.
Yeah.
So how did they make you feel?
It gave me chills because I didn't expect.
You didn't expect
I didn't
that.
expect to see that. I expected to see all the things about the Jacksons.
Yeah.
But when I saw his name on that inside cover,
Yeah.
where he had
Actually
purchased the
say
coat,
Yeah. First
that
page.
was
Rainy Cemetery?
I have a question.
Is it Rainy Cemetery?
Where is Louisa Furnace? Is that in North Carolina?
No, it's here.
Here.
It's in Montgomery County,
Yeah.
Okay.
not far from the Dixon County line.
Yep.
The area is called Louisa, and it's off of Highway 48, going back towards Southside.
Yep. And so we had that, right? And so as you see, what name do you all see? There you go. So that really, so this was after my visit to Alabama. So this was last year. We had been in Alabama 3 years prior. So this really brought a lot of things home, right? This is a 170-year-old ledger, and it revealed the existence overworked system which required enslaved workers to work 7 days a week year-round. You have to think about it. We got lights that we can just cut on and cut off, right? You can't cut off an iron furnace.
No.
Okay? That's not how that works, right? The workers were paid 50 cents to work on Sundays, money with which they could only purchase necessities such as shoes, winter coats, and items which were items automatically provided to other enslaved individuals in the agricultural space, right? The ledger contained many enslaved workers with the surnames deeply embedded in Montgomery and Dixon County. Now, there would not be enough adequate artillery as well as everyday usage if it was not for the iron furnaces. We're talking about the War of 1812. We're talking about the Civil War, right? We're talking about everything that makes viable the ability to protect yourself during war as well as just day-to-day living, right?
Yeah, I did find, we visited the Whitney Plantation in Louisiana. Whitney Plantation in Louisiana. And the kettles that they used to cook the sugar cane came from Middle Tennessee.
Yeah, and if you see them, like, I don't know if y'all seen them, but there's like these huge sugar bowls, right? And they're made out of cast iron, right? And those, a lot of those that ended up in Louisiana, the Low Country of Georgia, they were made right here, right? It would not be uncommon for these iron plantations. They average 250 people working 15, 16 hours a day. A lot of people did not live over 50 years old. They just didn't, because you were beaten up. There's no safety hats. There's no gloves.
Beaten up.
And sometimes the heat got up to 3,000 degrees, right? So that's just to put in consideration how deep this goes. So when we talk about the history of enslavement in Tennessee, this is going to be really brief. Most Africans and African Americans came to Tennessee prior to statehood via the colonies of Virginia and North Carolina. East Tennessee, 1 in 12 humans were enslaved. Middle Tennessee, 1 in 3 humans were enslaved. West Tennessee, 3 or 4 of every 5 humans, depending on the county, was enslaved. And we know that out in West Tennessee, they were known for what? Right, there you go. Right. So we now want to talk about who were the enslavers and where did they come from. I'm sure you all know this person over here. Maybe you know this person. We're going to talk about it. So we have Anthony Van Leer. Where's he from? Daniel Hillman, which is right here. Where's he from? Montgomery Bell, Pennsylvania. And there were others from the East Coast. So when you look back at in the South, but when you look, and this is Henry Hillman right here, and I'll talk more about him. I feel like we know enough about him, Montgomery Bell. I mean, God, goodness, if you don't know about Montgomery Bell in this area, you know. So we're going to talk about a couple other people. Go ahead.
All right, I have a question.
Yep.
Why do you not list James Robertson?
Well, I put in others. That list could have been.
Because James Robertson, I have a cousin in Louisiana that's a direct descendant of the Robertsons.
Yeah.
And in the Robertsons information, you see where Montgomery Bell came over here and opened the first furnaces that he actually sold to Montgomery Bell.
Yeah.
But he came, James Robertson came out of Virginia and North Carolina.
Yeah.
And you can't leave out the Robertsons because, of course, Charlotte, Tennessee, our county seat, is named for Mrs. Charlotte Robertson.
Well, the thing is, that's why I put in others, because this list goes, I don't even have enough, there's not enough computer storage to keep it. So I hear what you're saying, but what I'm saying is, that's why I put in others, because again, this list can go on and on and on, right?
Because when you get into Davidson County history and you read about James Robertson and his history and the family, you will see the connection to the iron furnaces and how he came over to Cumberland Furnace and started these iron furnaces and was shipping so much because there's some place, and I don't know who has it, but there is somebody that still has an iron pot that was made in Cumberland Furnace by James Robertson's group.
Yeah. Yeah. And so again, I didn't even have the band lyrics. I mean, again, this list can go on and on. So
you put the jewelry on or something.
yeah. And so what we find is some of these individuals before coming to the South, they have a certain their wealth. It looks a certain amount, right? So it may, let's just say hypothetically, Van Leer there was $20,000 in the 1830 census. I'm just throwing numbers out there. So then you get word that from the South, from relatives or what have you, saying, hey, you're doing pretty well out in the East, but we're eating really good in the South. And why are they eating really good in the South? Free labor. So you see these folks coming down South, tripling, quadrupling their net worth. Right? And not only that, we're seeing where they treated these iron furnaces like you would go buy a house and flip it. Because numerous people own various different furnaces during different times. And so it was a business. This was all business driven, and it was hard line driven, right? And so,
Could I ask you a question?
Yep.
You said there were probably in this area, how many furnaces you would think?
Roughly around, I mean, and I could be off, but like 12, 13, like when you count.
Well, 13 furnaces, and probably each furnace held about, 250 people at a time, plus at the time. And you know, there was probably replenishment. How much money do you guess that they made off of that free labor in those furnaces?
Yep, so that's right, that's what I got in. It's a good question. So the local population of enslavers, as well as not only iron furnace workers, but also people that may just be out in the counties who own enslaved people. Because see, you may have a person who was an enslaver, they may have only had 5 people that were enslaved, right? However, they would lease to the iron furnaces, right? Because you gotta flip it. You gotta make sure your investment comes back 2-3-fold. Otherwise, why do you have it? Because that person becomes liability because you're having to feed, house, and everything else, right? And so,
Gotta bring up,
yep.
not all the people worked in the furnace. There had to be so many people they had to have raise enough corn to feed the mules and horses to haul stuff.
Yep.
They also had to have the colliers who made the charcoal.
Yep.
So there was a lot of people who said that. All these other
It was a
things, they had to grow the crops to feed the people.
Yep.
So there were all these kind of jobs that absorbed all kinds of people.
Absolutely, yeah. It was a very comprehensive, well-oiled machine, and anything that you can think that you would need on an agricultural plantation, it's the same thing that's needed. To your point, you had to feed folks, right? You had to do all those things, and so people benefited immensely from the iron furnace business by leasing their enslaved workers to the furnaces for an annual profit. This was a common practice at the time to bring in extra income for those families. So we're going to be talking about, so right now this is information that we have on Solomon Rainey. And Solomon lived up the road in Louisa Creek, and by leasing each man that he enslaved, he could profit considerably. Enslavers were commonly given $175 to $200 a year of extra income for each man that they leased to an iron master, which is equivalent to $6,000 to $7,000 today, right? And so this means that Solomon was making a minimum of $84,000 a year in 2023's value, simply by signing a leasing agreement. He no longer had to pay for the room and board of the men or their medical care because they're off, right? They're gone. So that's how brutal this system was, because you're also separating families during this time period, right? Because the thing is, you need bodies, and you need a lot of them. Remember, I said the average person didn't live to what?
50.
They didn't live to 50 years old because the work was that brutal, right? And so they had to come up with these different ways, and they were getting people from across the country to come and be in this space. So again, business was booming. And when I mean it was booming, y'all, if y'all could see some of the numbers that we've seen as it relates to the money that these folks were making, I mean, hand over fist. It was a lot of money that they were making. And on some of these lists, you would see the list of the enslavers in their furnace, and oftentimes, so like when you look at an agricultural plantation, oftentimes you see the name of the enslaver and the enslaved, and they're taking on that same last name, right? On the list of some of the iron furnace workers, that was not the case. You did have some, but the majority of people had different last names. And you know why? Released. So the original enslaver had to maintain the same last name for that person because it went, so like when census workers would come around, et cetera, it was just all part of that, what identified your self-worth, right? By how many people you had. So even though they may not be in the same state, they could be across state lines or what have you, you were still able to count them and not have to give up their last names, and they would still have your same last name, you could count them on record, right? So again, business was booming. All right, so by studying census records, the group found that it was rare to find a man that was 8 over 50 working at Cumberland furnaces. The extreme physical demands of cutting timber and mining ore with picks and shovels wore their bodies out. The more dangerous work was loading the furnaces with the needed charcoal, iron, and limestone, as it was kept at a brutal 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. In total, it required between 100 to 200 men to run an iron furnace, and that was on a small level. All the furnaces that we have found, there have been over 200 people. But enslaved women also played a vital role in keeping the operation running. Women worked in supportive roles alongside the men as cooks and laundresses. So, this was something that we found, and this is Betty Carter. Was this? Yeah. So everyone, Melissa was able to assist us with this. Daniel Hillman was one of the wealthiest enslavers, iron masters, and would often lease and purchase humans out of state. So this is Aunt Betty Carter at 110 years old. We don't know exactly what year this was, do we? Was it in the 1920s?
Yeah.
I think it was like the 1920s when this was. She was 110 years old. She lived in Erin, and she described herself as one of Hillman's N-words, and remembers well Daniel Hillman and other Tennessee Iron Kings of the years before the war. And so this was in 1824 where she says she was born in Savannah, Georgia, and that's where she came from, Savannah, Georgia. So he went to Savannah, Georgia to get her. And this was common practice. They would send people to go pick up these people, these humans, and enslave them. And of course, when you're doing such, you're separating them from family, right? And so I will always identify women in the institution of slavery just because I think that sometimes they often get they get short end of the stick, and they're typecasted to a certain degree, right? But they were the heart and soul, because if you're not tending to the crops and doing the cooking and doing the laundry, because you can imagine as it relates to laundry at an iron furnace, you're doing a lot of laundry, right? Without them, it doesn't work, right? And so now I have to talk about my fourth great grandmother. Her name was Harriet. You see the last name? Hillman. Right here, this historical marker is Franklin and Armfield Slave Office at 1315 Duke Street in Alexandria, Virginia. And this was the largest slave pen in the United States at one point. They were trafficking 1,000 enslaved people a year at one point, all throughout the South. Okay, I visited the pen. It was a very surreal visit, especially because I visited it after I found this out. So my ancestor, Harriet Hillman, was born in 1820, possibly there in Virginia. Not quite sure, don't know what her surname was prior to that. So she was held at this slave pen. What would happen is the enslavers would pre-purchase their enslaved people. They would pre-purchase them, and then that's when they would be shipped out. So Baltimore's right up the street, and they had a port there. So they shipped her from Baltimore, Maryland to New Orleans. Okay? Now, New Orleans, the further south the better, right? That's just kind of how the system worked. New Orleans had huge slave markets, so it was a lot. Right? It was a dime a dozen down there. So what Daniel Hillman did, per the researcher that I talked to that is in that area, is that he purchased my fourth great grandmother from the slave pen. They sent out descriptions and everything. They sent her to New Orleans, and then he sent someone from Dixon County to go pick her up and bring her to this area. And so that's how she got here. Her daughter, Julia Hillman, who is my third times grandmother, was also here as well. And she most likely was doing domestic work at the iron furnace. Okay?
The name of the ship?
Choose her. How was he able to pick that particular person?
So whoever, they had descriptions of these folks, and it was pretty much, you read what it is that you need, and you pick it. He probably never most likely never laid eyes on her. Sometimes they did have doctors to go in and inspect them prior to them signing off on agreeing to purchase these humans.
What was the difference in the auction? Because they had the auction block, they were buying them from there. But then if there was a special one, that would be called out.
Well, see, Franklin Armfield was a reputable site that you could buy people, right? And so they had a reputation, if you will. And so it's kind of like, I don't want to compare brands, but I'm going to compare brands. Has anyone ever used Tussie deodorant?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, you're funky by 12 o'clock. Okay? So I'm going to compare Tussie to, like, I guess, Arm & Hammer. I don't know. I'm throwing anything out. So they were Arm & Hammer, right? Like, they were well known. You know you're getting a good product. And it's tough to say that, but it is what it is when you go to them. And so they didn't have to think that much. It's like, oh, they're coming from Armfield and Franklin. Boom. Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and roll with that, right? So.
The name of the ship is Isaac Franklin, who was a big slave owner not only at Fairview out in Gallatin. His second wife, his first wife was Adelicia Hayes, who also became Adelicia Ackland. He had he was not only involved with the slave shipping and selling, he owned a huge plantation at St. Francisville, Louisiana, called Angola. Angola is now the site of the Louisiana Penitentiary on the banks of the Mississippi. My grandfather was warden of Angola, my father and my aunt were born there.
The more you know.
Question.
We appreciate you. Yes.
Simply the surname of Harriet Hillman.
Yep.
Prior to could it have been Hope Slider?
That was the guy who was the shipper. Yeah. So he was the one who was in charge of the ship. Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, they have brokers and stuff like that. Is that correct? They
Yeah.
people. It's like you do a livestock.
Yep.
Brokering this human at this price based off of these needs. So
Yeah. That's
something
exactly how it went. Yeah. Absolutely. And so this is her grandson, and this is my second great grandfather, Henry Hillman, right here, and that's his daughter, and that's me. This is the home, the former slave dwelling he was born in Montgomery County. It was rural at one point, as you all know. It has grown tremendously, and so it's not necessarily so rural anymore. But this is Harriet's grandson, Henry Hillman. And that's my second great grandfather. We played on this property for years and years. It's probably one of the few last existing slave dwellings in Clarksville. As you see, it's in terrible shape. The preservation efforts for it is just difficult. It costs money. If we were able to fix it up, we would, because it was a residence at one point. They added on to it in the 40s. And multiple families were born there, but it's in despair right now. We're just trying to keep the land.
Well, was it on a plantation?
So it was on a plantation at one point. Yep, absolutely, for sure. And so this is the only picture that we do have of any of the Hillman. So we're very happy to be able to have that picture of Henry Hillman. So his mother's name is Julia, and she was born here in Dixon County. So, getting back to Uncle Ferd, and we're wrapping up here. So, the war between the states, because when I interview some folks down in Alabama talking about this, they just won't call it the Civil War.
No.
Nope, they won't. It's the war between the states. So trouble started brewing. So we're on the cusp of the Civil War, right? If I have an enslaved person that's in Tennessee and I live in Alabama, or I have an enslaved person that's in Kentucky and I live in Louisiana, and I hear about this war happening, what are my next steps? No, I need my property back. So Sarah, right? Sarah was like, just like a lot of people did, Ferdinand needs to come back. He got to come back. That's my property. And I think that there was some special connection as it relates to Ferdinand, as it relates to his name, because the founder of, the surveyor of Florence was named Ferdinand Sononer. Yep. And he's the only Ferdinand that we find in the whole county, right? And so there's something to that, right? So Sarah was like, you got to bring him back. And so he died in 1908. And it says right here, old Uncle Ferdinand Ferd Jackson, a worthy colored man of the old time school, died last week, aged over 80 years. He was a faithful old servant of the Jackson family, and his death removes an old landmark of the past. However, some people can't let things go. And so they built a bank, which is the Regent's Bank, which is an exact replica of the Forks of Cyprus, which is completely asinine. I saw it and I'm like, we were just like, what is this? This is crazy. So the Forks of Cyprus burnt in the 1960s, and it was a tough day for folks in that community. They were crying. I mean, it was just a tough day for folks in that community. So unfortunately, Ferdinand Jackson had to go back. But we're descendants of Ferdinand Jackson, and we're here. So why aren't we in Florence, Alabama? Because he had children by someone, either named Eliza or Elizabeth, and they didn't go back. So all of his children stayed here. So there's another separation again. Now, I'm grateful that I'm here. I'm sure you all are grateful to be alive too. However, he married twice again after he got back to the Fortress of Cyprus. We find him in the 1870 census, and he's got another woman, and then he's married again. I think I found him, I think it was a 1900 census. How does he know what love is? Right? I mean, really, when you sit back and you think about it, if you're working 6 days a week at the iron furnaces, what energy do you have to give to a family at that point? You're working 16 hours a week. A day, right? I mean, like, can you really understand what anything outside of survival looks like?
It's still the human nature. He's a human.
Well, absolutely, right? But unfortunately, he was a human who had a lot of fractures due to something that he did not ask for. And so, as a mental health therapist, because I'm a licensed clinical mental health therapist as well, I look at this and I look at his attempts at love afterwards as just trying to find what being a human is. Because you got to think, he started off at the Fortress of Cyprus, he was removed and was here for well over 20, 30 years, and then was sent back without his family. Right? And so this is what the newspaper article, we were so happy to be able to have this because it was just great for us to have.
Did he have a family before he got removed?
So that's something that we don't
know, but we suspect he may have. And we suspect that wife that he had in 1870 might have been a wife or whatever before that, because her name is Fanny.
Yeah.
My third great grandmother, his daughter from here, is also named Fanny.
Yeah. So it's a possibility.
Did she die?
The one that was here? Yeah, Eliza?
She stayed here and raised children.
Yeah, she stayed here and raised
children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren.
Yeah.
And what was Eliza's name?
Eliza, well, we think that if we see Croft, so we're thinking it could potentially be Eliza Croft, but we're not 100% sure. Yeah, we're not 100% sure. So even with all of that, and I'm sorry that this is cut off, no one at the iron furnaces just laid down, right? And you're going to see this in the exhibit upstairs. There were acts of resistance. There were people saying that this is too much and we're going to do our best to make a run for it so we can have autonomy over ourselves. People just did not necessarily accept their instances and the situations that they were in. There had always been people that were seeking their own liberation since arriving here in this country, right? So, it's very, people really put these efforts into taking their lives in their own hands and seeking freedom, but unfortunately that did come with cost. But it's very good to see that people have done such. And so this book right here, and I know the light's off, I'll be able to share with you, which is called Runways, Coffles, and Fancy Girls by Bill Carey. I think everyone should own this book. This is a book full of ads of individuals who have run away all throughout this county. This was helpful in our research, as well as other counties throughout Tennessee. This is a must-have in your library. Okay, it's called Runways, Coffles, and Fancy Girls by Bill Carey, and it was very important. And there's a lot of people from this county that are identified, and sadly, a lot of people that are identified, they have burn marks, they have deformities, a lot of deformities that are happening. And so you can only imagine that the reason which why they're doing, thank you, the reason which why they're doing such is because of that. So to wrap this piece up, what I want to do is read this piece. After emancipation, up until the 1930s and almost 40s, you still had people that were looking for their family. From pre-Civil War, people were still putting out newspaper ads. I'm trying to identify, if you know this person, please connect them to me. 1930s, right? I mean, that's a long time, y'all. But they never gave up hope, right? So this specific person right here, a mother of 27 children in search of her offspring, to the editor of the Banner, knowing that you have always been kind to the poor, I desire to put this notice in your paper. I desire to know the whereabouts of my 5 children, colored. Polly Bell, Grafton Bell, Jeremiah Bell, Lorenzo Bell, and Fannie Bell. They lived in Dixon County when last heard from. I have made every effort in my power to hear from them, and having failed therein, am very unhappy. We were separated in the year of 1856, at which the time we resided in Dixon County at Bell's Iron Works. I have had 27 children, and now I don't know the whereabouts but 3. Very respectfully, Jane Bell, formerly servant of Montgomery Bell and now at the Planters Hotel, Summer Street. So that is how, that's the pain that kept lingering with these folks post-emancipation. Zach, you can
Yes.
yeah, thank you. So that is that's the painstaking truth of this, of what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about the separation, but we're also talking about individuals who have decided to take emancipation upon themselves and to run. And in the exhibit, you are going to see very detailed descriptions of things that happened. 6 panels that are up there, and I ask that you all take your time and to read them. Some of them are very, very tough to read. In particular, one with Britt Rainey, which is a very, very heart-wrenching story. But when we talk about mental health, and when we talk about a person who reached their breaking point, Britt Rainey was one of those individuals who I believe worked 40, he had 6 days off in a whole year.
Oh, wow.
6 days total. This is documented in a whole year. And so when you read the story, it is heart-wrenching what actually transpired. And this was from his enslaver that you read, that you see this information that happened, right? So we do have some descendants of the iron furnaces that are here. And I would like, just if you all don't mind raising your hand if you're a descendant of the iron furnaces, right? So we have some represented. You are too. Also, let me say this. Yes. She's gonna jump on me, y'all.
No, I don't jump. You know I'm not gonna.
But listen, one of the beautiful things about this, though, and I know you're like, well, how in the world do you find beauty out of this, right? A lot of these guys, when the opportunity came about, they crossed enemy lines and they joined the USCT Colored Troops.
Yeah.
The railroad that goes through here, they joined the 13th, they joined the 16th, they joined the 12th, they joined all of these different regiments that were responsible for cultivating and making this county as well as other counties as we know it, right? And so I know that discussing this type of topic is, it can be tough, but people that are hell-bent on surviving tend to make lemonade out of lemons to the best of their ability. And everyone that enlisted in those Army regiments did just that. And because they did that, a lot of people that you see here today are able to be here today. So we're forever indebted and thankful for that. Yep.
Well, hi, my name is Ardonna Fox, and this is my great-great-grandfather.
Okay.
It is the great grandfather of my cousins that are all here,
Okay. Okay. Good.
drivers.
Yeah.
He escaped
Okay.
from the Cumberland.
He was in Cumberland Furnace.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So we're gonna, so what I want to do is, because I want us to make sure that we're able to get upstairs, and it's kind of cramped, so does anyone have any questions, further as it relates to the descendants who are here, or anything as it relates to the presentation? If anyone has any questions, then we can do that.
Well, my question is, right, is do you have more information on the actual escape? Yeah, because we know he escaped with about 54 other slaves. He walked to Clarksville to join the Union Army.
So in Clarksville, there were a couple places. You had Fort Defiance. You had which regiment was he?
16.
16.
Do you have any information on the escape, though?
Not on the escape. Now we have information on, and you'll see up there, on people who escaped who unfortunately were caught and killed, unfortunately, right? But as far as that, you kind of got to treat that like the Underground Railroad. Some secrets just can't be told.
Well, we can find some things out too, more than we do know.
Yeah, but I mean, it was one of those things, right? Like,
of course.
And so, but yes, in Clarksville, there were a lot of regiments that were coming from here, that were coming from Kentucky, and other places that made up this hodgepodge of safety, if you will, for individuals that were trying to get away. So, questions for the descendants or the presentation?
If anyone here is related to Ida Mae Van Leer Mixon, please let me know.
I think we are. I think we are Van Leer.
Van Leer,
for sure.
Yeah.
Then offline, I would like to talk to you.
Just that, the next.
I have a question about the slaves that you were talking about, the enslaved workers who worked in the furnaces who were identified in the census. And I was wondering, were they identified because they were property, or they were the property of a business as opposed to a family? Because I was under the impression that before the Civil War, there was no record of.
No, they were identified in the book. So their names were identified in the Iron Furnace book.
In the Iron Furnace book.
Right.
Okay, with the enslaver's last name.
Right.
And then, what information can you provide about after the Civil War, if people, African Americans who had been formerly enslaved, were likely to take their enslaver's name or take another name, or because they did not have surnames before. Did they take someone else's surname, or?
It was mixed, because you have to also think about it. That was sometimes that person's first opportunity to have autonomy.
Right.
And so you see these different spellings, or just changing them in period, so they're not necessarily associated with it, right? But then also, when you do have people who have been separated, who aren't in the same space anymore, they may also decide to keep it just because we saw the letter where the woman was trying to reach back out to, and there has been some things that have been documented that I've read years ago, to where people would go back and forth with changing these names, also with the hopes that someone would be able to recognize them and seek them as well.
And what I found in my research is that oftentimes a person would take the surname of the first person, the first owner, and keep that surname, even though they might have been sold 2 or 3 times. But they would keep that first one so that they could be able to find their relatives at some point.
Yeah.
But would that be reflected in the census before 1865, or they just?
Well, the thing is, a lot of the times you find these, they're not in census.
Right.
But you find these in deeds, bills of sales, all kinds of things like that, different kinds of records. And a lot of people are sitting on these kinds of records. And, sometimes we're lucky and we're able to find them. But a lot of times people have these records that pertain to enslaved individuals, and they don't share them.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
So, I just want to do one more thing because we do have to go upstairs for the sake of time, y'all. I do apologize. But for the individuals who are descendants, can you just please say the surname of your ancestor who were at, or if there's multiple, who were at the iron furnaces?
Well, this is Driver.
Driver.
We also had Bells though.
And Bells.
Van Leers.
Van Leers.
Yeah.
Lots,
Lots.
Bear Springs.
Okay.
We had Jackson's, Ramey's, Daniels, and Bells.
Yeah. And Jackson, and there were also Tallies that were there as well, which is a name that's in this area. And so that's the presentation portion, you all. Time kind of got by us. So we're going to go upstairs and we're going to look at the exhibit. This was, Tracy and I, we really worked hard to the core to put something very comprehensive together, and we hope that you all do enjoy it. And I would be remiss if I did not, and Terry, you may kill me for this, but Terry is a descendant of Daniel Hillman, and the power of people, regardless of your race, as well as regardless of your historical background, he being a descendant of the enslaver and me being a descendant of the enslaved, when you don't have egos in the way, or when you're not so stuck on what it is that was passed down to your family that you just won't, right, accept or see things different, then a lot of magic happens. And so we've been communicating for years and have been able to share valuable information which has allowed us to both move the needle forward, develop friendship, and a better understanding of our history. And so I appreciate you for coming.
Everybody to actually go see the exhibit at this point. There are 2 staircases to go upstairs. They both go to the same gallery. If stairs happen to be an issue, just go straight to the back of the building. There's an elevator that runs between the 2 floors.
Bridget, you did an excellent
That was good.
That was very good.
Good to see you again.
I'm gonna go back.
If nothing else, we go to McDonald's. Yeah, that's nice.